By morning, the flight was preparing to land. Lights were turned on, breakfast served, passengers stretched and blinked into the early light. Melanie walked through the cabin one last time. She reached Keanu's seat. He was already standing, jacket on, calm as ever. She hesitated, then said softly, "Thank you." He looked puzzled. "For what?" "For not hiding your grief. For talking to me. For letting me see it." His smile was small, honest. "Most people turn away." "I almost did," she admitted. "But I think I needed to see it." He nodded slowly. As he reached for his bag, the necklace slipped forward again, the ring and bead catching a small flash of morning sun. It was beautiful in a way only stories are. Melanie said, "You helped me remember my father." Keanu met her gaze. "Then he's here too." The plane landed minutes later, and Melanie didn't watch him walk off the plane as a movie star. She watched him leave as a man who carried others in silence, and she promised herself she would carry her father too. Starting today, it was 2 weeks later when Melanie saw him again. She wasn't expecting it. She had picked up an extra shift, last minute, on a flight from Los Angeles to Seattle. Short flight, rainy forecast, nothing special. But as she stepped onto the jet bridge, flipping through the passenger manifest, her breath caught. Seat 3A, Keanu Reeves. Again. Her hands gripped the folder tighter, then loosened. She hadn't told anyone what happened last time. She didn't need to. It wasn't gossip, it was memory. Something she had quietly folded and tucked into her chest. And now, he was back. The plane was boarding. She didn't see him at first, but when he finally stepped into the cabin, carrying the same worn backpack, hoodie half-zipped, hair tucked behind his ears, her heart skipped. He saw her too, and nodded, not surprised, not awkward, like he had expected her, like something unfinished was still waiting. After takeoff, the crew served coffee. Melanie walked the aisles, smile polite, movements routine. But when she reached seat 3A, her hands slowed. Keanu looked up at her. "Coffee black," he said quietly. She smiled. "Still the same." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "You remembered." Melanie didn't answer. She just handed him the cup and stepped aside. But before she walked away, he said, "You still think about your dad?" She froze. Not because it hurt, but because he asked so simply, like the question had been waiting. She turned slowly. "Every day." "Do you carry anything of his?" Keanu asked. Melanie hesitated, then reached into her uniform pocket. She pulled out a small, folded note, soft and yellowed, handwritten. "He left this on the kitchen table the day before his last chemo," she said. "It just says, 'Don't forget to buy milk, and don't forget I love you.'" Keanu took a deep breath. "That's beautiful," he said. Melanie nodded. "It used to make me cry. Now it makes me stand straighter." "Then that's love," Keanu whispered. And the plane kept moving through the clouds, carrying 2 people and the stories they couldn't leave behind. Hours passed. The weather outside turned stormy. Clouds gathered. Wind picked up. The captain's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some mild turbulence. Please remain seated with seatbelts fastened." The plane dipped once, then again. Passengers gasped. Melanie returned to her jump seat, strapping in. Her eyes scanned the cabin, checking faces, checking calm. But when she looked at seat 3A, something surprised her. Keanu wasn't nervous. He was calm. But his hand was gripping the necklace, tight, his thumb moving over the wooden bead like it was a rosary. His lips barely moved, like he was speaking to someone not here, someone who used to be. After they landed safely, the crew applauded softly in the galley. Just relief, just routine. But Melanie stayed behind for a moment. She walked over to Keanu as he stood up. He was still touching the necklace. "You were praying," she said. Keanu looked at her, almost confused. "Not exactly," he said. "I was talking to her, to both of them." "What did you say?" He hesitated. "I told them, if something happens, I'm ready. And if nothing happens, I'll keep going." Melanie didn't answer. She just stood there, because the truth in that one sentence wrapped around her like wind, and she knew what he meant. Some people survive pain by hiding it. Others survive by honoring it. That night, Melanie went home and opened a drawer she hadn't touched in months. Inside were small things: her father's watch, an old photo, the grocery list from his last week. She took the note, the one about milk, and slipped it into a tiny glass locket, wore it around her neck. It wasn't stylish, it wasn't pretty, but it felt right. She looked in the mirror and whispered, "If something happens, I'm ready. And if nothing does, I'll keep going." Another article popped up. This time, it mentioned a baby, unborn, lost. She leaned back slowly. The necklace, the ring, the silence. It wasn't just jewelry. She returned to the cabin, walking slower now, more careful, more aware. Keanu looked up as she passed, as if he knew she had seen. There was no blame in his eyes, just something else, something softer than forgiveness. "I didn't know," Melanie said gently, kneeling beside his seat. "You weren't supposed to," he replied. "Is it your daughter's?" His fingers touched the ring. He nodded once. Melanie's throat tightened. "I was wrong to laugh at it." He shook his head. "You weren't laughing at her. You were just seeing a necklace." But her voice cracked. "I should have seen more." He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time his voice held something different. "Most people don't," he said, "and that's okay. But when someone does, it changes everything." Melanie stood up slowly. She walked back down the aisle, quiet now, and every time she glanced back at him, she didn't see a celebrity anymore. She saw a man who wore memory like armor, grief like skin, and love like something eternal. And for the first time in a long time, she wished she had never opened her mouth, but was also glad she did. The plane was somewhere over the Atlantic when the captain dimmed the lights, and the cabin fell into a soft hush. Some passengers closed their eyes, some opened laptops, but Melanie couldn't relax. Not after what she had learned. She stood in the galley, arms crossed, staring at the small coffee machine like it held answers. Her chest felt tight, not because she was ashamed of the comment she made earlier, but because she had stepped into something she didn't expect, something deep, something sacred. Keanu Reeves wasn't just wearing a necklace, he was carrying a story, a memory, a grave, and Melanie had laughed at it. 30 minutes passed before she walked back to the first-class cabin. She wasn't supposed to check on Keanu again. He hadn't asked for anything. But her feet moved before her thoughts did. He was still looking out the window. Same seat, same posture. But this time, his hand was resting gently over the necklace, like he was guarding it from something no one could see. She crouched beside him again, quieter this time. "I read about her," she said softly. "Your daughter, and her mother." He turned to her, eyes gentle. No anger, just sadness, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that hums through every breath. "I wasn't trying to be nosy," Melanie whispered. "I just wanted to understand." He looked down at the ring and bead. The necklace didn't shine. It didn't sparkle. It just sat there, as ordinary as dust. But somehow, in that silence, it became the most important thing on the whole plane. "Her name was Ava," Keanu said. "We never got to hold her." Melanie sat back slowly on her knees. I'm sorry. He nodded. I know. For a moment, there was nothing more. Just the hum of the engines. Just the soft breath of a man who had lost and still chose to live. After the short moment passed, Keanu leaned back in his seat. He closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but to remember. Melanie didn't move. He spoke again, voice even lower this time. When Ava passed, everything stopped. Jennifer and we didn't talk much after that. We tried, but we were both broken. Sometimes two broken people can't hold each other without cutting deeper. Melanie listened, heart heavy. I started walking a lot, he said. Miles, alone, every night. That's how I made this. He lifted the necklace slightly. I found the bead in the dirt one night near an old park bench. It was from a broken bracelet some kid probably dropped. And the ring, Jennifer gave it to me once. Said it was too big for her. I never wore jewelry before that. Melanie blinked fast, trying not to cry. It's all I have left, he said. And the way he said it didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like choice. He wasn't carrying pain to suffer. He was carrying it to remember. Later that night, Melanie was on break. She sat alone in the dark corner of the crew rest area. Her phone buzzed quietly. A message from her sister. Did you meet Keanu? Tell me everything. Melanie didn't reply. She opened her photo app and scrolled back to a picture from 2 years ago. Her dad, in a hospital gown, weak smile, holding her hand. He had passed 4 months later. She had never worn anything of his, never kept a thing, just memories. And even those were fading. For the first time in 2 years, she cried. Not loud, not broken, just quiet tears. Tears that understood now what it meant to carry a piece of someone, and what it meant to wear memory on your skin. Me again, he said, stepping into line beside her. You following me now? She joked. Or maybe you're following me, he replied. They both smiled, not because it was funny, but because it felt easy, like they had known each other far longer than they had. They sat down with coffee, tucked into a quiet corner of the shop. No one noticed him. Or maybe they did, but respected the quiet. Either way, it felt like the world slowed just a little for them. I thought about what you said, Melanie said, stirring her drink. Which part? What am I going to do with all that love? Keanu leaned forward. And? I don't know, she whispered. I keep remembering how much of it I kept to myself, how much I buried. He nodded. Most people do. Do you? Keanu looked down. I used to. Melanie watched him carefully. But? She asked. He smiled faintly. Then I met someone who asked me the same thing. Who? A man on a bench, Keanu said. He was feeding pigeons in silence. I sat next to him after a rough day. He didn't say anything for a long time, just handed me some seeds. Melanie leaned in. I asked him why he fed the birds every day. He said, because I loved someone once who loved birds, and I've got too much love to waste. Melanie's eyes stung. That's how you do it, he said. You don't wait to find someone to give it to. You just give it. Anywhere it fits. Later, as they stood outside the cafe, the city lights behind them, Keanu looked at her one last time before heading off. Do something with it, he said. Your father wouldn't want you to keep it bottled up. Melanie nodded, her fingers brushing over the glass locket. I think I know where to start, she said. Over the next week, Melanie didn't fly. Instead, she visited a local hospital where her father once received treatment. She walked through the oncology floor, stopping by the nurse's desk. Do you need volunteers? She asked. They looked up. Always. Within days, she was reading to patients, helping elderly men walk down the hallway, bringing coffee to tired families in waiting rooms, all without telling them who she was, not even her last name, just a woman who had carried grief too long, and finally decided to place it in someone else's hands. One night she met a young boy in the children's unit, 8 years old, bald from treatment, pale, quiet. He wouldn't speak to anyone, until Melanie sat down beside him and whispered, "My dad used to whistle like a bird. I was so embarrassed. I used to tell him to stop." The boy blinked. "He whistled at the grocery store, in traffic, once at a funeral." The boy smiled. Just a little. Melanie leaned in and whistled softly. Not loud, just enough. The boy giggled, and then he spoke. First time in days. "You're funny." The next morning, Melanie received a message. No name, no intro, just a photo. Keanu Reeves, on a street in Japan, standing by a small sidewalk shrine. His hand rested on the necklace. The caption read, "I told her you found a way to share your love." Melanie didn't cry. Not this time. She smiled, because some people walk through grief like it's a tunnel. But others light candles along the way. Months passed. The flights kept coming. Coasts changed, passengers changed. Faces came and went like soft echoes. But one thing stayed with Melanie, the weight of the small glass locket around her neck. It had become more than a keepsake. It was her anchor, her beginning, her way back to the man she still missed every day, and her quiet promise to never carry love without sharing it. She kept volunteering at the hospital, even on days when her body ached and her voice was tired. Some days, she simply sat with strangers who needed presence more than words. Other days, she laughed so hard with the children that nurses had to peek in and tell her to keep it down. But she never forgot the story that started it all. The necklace, the ring, the man on seat 3A. It was spring when she saw him again. She was off duty, walking through a park near downtown LA. The cherry blossoms had just started blooming. She passed street musicians and families with strollers, her coffee in one hand, a book tucked under her arm. Then she saw him, Keanu, sitting on a bench, alone, feeding birds. She stopped in her tracks. He didn't look surprised. He just smiled and patted the space next to him. Melanie walked over and sat down slowly. "You remember that old man on the bench?" he asked, offering her a handful of seeds. "The one who fed birds for someone he loved?" she said, smiling. "How could I forget?" They scattered seeds in silence for a while. Pigeons fluttered in. Finally, Keanu said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About all the people we pass," he said. "How many carry something heavy, something no one sees? We never know what's in someone's necklace, or locket, or silence." Melanie looked down at her locket, then said, "But maybe the point isn't knowing." Keanu glanced over. "Maybe the point is asking," she continued. "Not just, 'How are you?' but really asking, really listening, even if they don't answer." Keanu nodded. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think you're right." They sat there for almost an hour. No cameras, no noise, just two people. One who once scoffed at a necklace, one who never expected to explain it. Both of them different now, changed not by fame or tragedy, but by a quiet choice to see what others don't, to care before it's convenient, to feel before it's fashionable. Before leaving, Melanie reached into her bag and pulled out a small folded note. "This is from a little boy in the children's unit," she said. "He wanted me to give it to someone strong." Keanu took it gently, opened it. The handwriting was crooked, childlike. "Thank you for helping Miss Melanie smile again." Keanu's eyes softened. He folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. "I'll keep it," he whispered. "Like I keep everything." That evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Keanu stood in front of his mirror at home. He removed the necklace, set it down slowly. Beside it, he placed the new folded note. Then, he lit a candle. The flame flickered, small but steady. He didn't say anything out loud, but in his eyes, something peaceful began to bloom. Not because he had forgotten, but because he had finally shared it with someone who knew how to hold it. Melanie, across the city, curled up in bed with her father's old sweater over her shoulders. She pressed her fingers to the locket, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you for finding me again, Dad." And in the quiet night air, nothing moved, but everything felt lighter. Because some grief is never healed, but it can be carried. And when it's shared with kindness, it becomes something else. It becomes love again. The airport lounge was full of noise and busy energy. Announcements echoed over the speakers. People rushed past one another, and the clatter of luggage wheels rolled endlessly across the tiled floor. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in a corner, far from the crowd. He wore a plain hoodie, old jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. There was nothing about him that screamed celebrity. Only one thing stood out: a small, strange necklace around his neck. A simple chain, silver in color, with a black and faded wooden bead at the center. It looked handmade, worn down, and not something anyone would expect on someone like him. A young flight attendant passed by, glancing at him as she walked toward the boarding gate. She paused for a second, then turned back and looked again. The necklace caught her eye. Her brows raised slightly. She wasn't rude, but there was something in her look, a small smirk, like a silent joke only she understood. "Interesting choice of jewelry," she said lightly, walking closer. "Bit out of fashion, don't you think?" Keanu looked up slowly. His face was calm, soft, not offended, just quiet. He touched the necklace gently, like it was made of glass. His thumb brushed over the wooden bead. "Yeah," he said, voice low. "It's very old." She laughed a little, almost awkwardly. "Well, I guess if you're famous, you can wear anything and call it a trend." Keanu didn't smile. He looked down again, eyes far away now. Not on the necklace. Not on her. Somewhere else. His hand was still touching the bead. The flight attendant hesitated. She suddenly felt like she'd stepped somewhere she shouldn't have, but she covered it with a light voice. "Anyway, we're boarding in about 10. I'll see you on the flight, Mr. Reeves." He nodded once. Didn't say another word. Inside the plane, first class was almost empty. Just a few quiet travelers, a businesswoman on her phone, a young man with noise-canceling headphones, and Keanu, seated by the window in the last row of the cabin. He didn't speak, didn't move much, just stared out at the tarmac as rain started to fall softly against the glass. The same flight attendant, her name tag said Melanie, walked by again with pre-flight drinks. She offered him one, and he nodded politely, taking the water. But her eyes kept drifting to the necklace again. She didn't know why. Something about it felt not right. Or maybe too right. Too personal. After takeoff, while most passengers settled into sleep or entertainment, Melanie stood in the galley, staring at the small manifest on her tablet. It listed Keanu's name. Nothing else about him. No assistant, no entourage, no special requests, just him. She turned to a senior crew member beside her and whispered, "Do you know what's up with him? Keanu Reeves? He seems off." The older attendant shrugged. "He travels quiet, always alone, never complains, tip-top manners, just one of those people who carry something you can't see." "What do you mean?" "Grief," the older woman said. "You ever seen someone carry it like a suitcase? Never sets it down? That's him." Melanie felt something shift in her chest. A weight she hadn't expected. About 2 hours into the flight, turbulence began. Nothing major, just enough to jolt a drink or two. Melanie was walking past Keanu's row when the plane shook hard and her cart bumped into his arm. Water splashed onto his jeans. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she gasped, rushing to grab napkins. Keanu smiled gently. "It's all right." But as she reached over to help, she noticed something new. Under his jacket, just beside the necklace, there was a second object hanging from the chain. A tiny metal ring. Old. Dark. Not polished. It looked almost rusted. She froze, staring. "What's that?" she asked without thinking. Keanu's hand rose and quietly covered it. The smile on his face faded. "It belonged to someone," he said. Melanie backed up. "I didn't mean to—" "You didn't offend me," he interrupted softly. "But some things aren't trends. They're stories. They're lives." He turned back toward the window. Melanie stood there a few seconds more, not sure what to say. Eventually, she walked back to the galley. But her mind didn't leave the necklace or the ring. The turbulence passed. Passengers settled again. The sky outside the plane was turning soft orange, the sun beginning to set above the clouds. It was a quiet kind of beauty, the kind only seen from a place between earth and sky. And Keanu didn't look away from it once. After dinner service, the crew had a short break. Melanie found herself looking up Keanu's name. Not gossip, not news. She searched for something quieter, something older. She didn't expect to find the photo. A grainy image, taken years ago. Keanu standing outside a hospital, holding hands with a young woman. She was smiling. He wasn't. He looked tired. The caption underneath was short. Keanu Reeves with Jennifer Syme, weeks before her passing. Melanie paused. Across town, in a quiet hotel room, Keanu sat alone. He placed the necklace on the table gently. Beside it, he added a folded photo. Not for display, not for pain, just as a reminder. Because the past doesn't leave us. But we can choose how to walk with it. Some carry it like chains. Some carry it like wings. Melanie woke early the next morning. The glass locket still rested on her collarbone, warm from her skin. She hadn't taken it off since the night before. Not even to sleep. When she touched it, something shifted inside her. Not sadness, not grief, something gentler. Like her father's voice was finally close again. She stared at her reflection for a long time before dressing for work. Today's route, Seattle to New York. A long flight. She didn't expect to see him again, but by now, something deep inside her was beginning to believe that his appearances weren't by chance. Boarding was almost complete when she glanced at the manifest. Her breath caught. Seat 2C, Keanu Reeves. Again. Third time. Melanie didn't know what it meant. Fate. Coincidence. Or maybe something unfinished between them. But her hands didn't shake this time. She walked into the cabin, her smile steady, her steps calm. Keanu was already seated, reading. Hoodie on, necklace visible. He looked up when he saw her, and for the first time, he smiled. A real one. Not the half-nod he gave strangers, not the polite mask he wore on red carpets. This was soft, personal. Recognition without words. After takeoff, she served drinks. As she reached his row, he looked up and tapped his chest lightly. "You're wearing something now," he said. Melanie touched the glass locket. "A note. My dad's." Keanu nodded. "Does it help?" "Yes," she whispered. He looked away then and said, "Good." Melanie lowered her voice. "Can I ask you something personal?" He turned back. "You already have. Twice." She smiled. "This one's different." He waited. "How did you know when it was time to stop being quiet about your grief?" His answer came after a long pause. I didn't, he said. But one day, I realized the silence wasn't protecting them anymore. It was just pushing people away. Melanie blinked. So you started talking? No, he said. I started listening, really listening, to others, to stories, to pain that wasn't mine. That's when I stopped drowning. As the flight continued, turbulence returned. Not dangerous, but enough to make passengers uneasy. One elderly woman in row 5 began to panic. She gripped the armrest and started breathing fast. Melanie rushed to her side. Deep breaths, she said gently. You're safe. But the woman kept whispering, I can't be up here. I'm scared. My husband, he passed in a plane crash 30 years ago. I swore I'd never fly again. Keanu heard it. He stood slowly, walked to her seat, and without saying his name, without needing an introduction, he crouched beside her. I lost someone too, he said gently. The sky feels different when you're carrying someone, but they're not above us. They're with us. The woman looked at him. Tears fell. You think he's here? She asked. I don't think, Keanu said. I know. She took a breath. Another. And slowly, she calmed. After the flight, Melanie caught up to Keanu outside the gate. She tapped his shoulder. What you said back there? I'll remember it forever. Keanu didn't say much. He simply said, we carry each other. That's all. He turned to leave, but then paused. Next time, he said, you ask me something personal. Melanie laughed lightly. And what will you ask? He looked at her, eyes warm. What you're going to do with all that love. Then he walked away. That night, Melanie didn't scroll through her phone. She didn't fall asleep to noise. She sat in silence and wrote. She wrote everything she remembered about her dad, the way he whistled when he cooked, the way he rubbed his hands together before speaking, the way he held her shoulder when she was unsure. She wrote until her fingers ached, and when she finished, she folded the paper and added it to her locket, because some grief is too heavy to forget, and some love is too deep to keep locked away. The next time she saw him, it wasn't on a flight. Melanie had just finished a long-haul trip to London and returned to Los Angeles the same evening. She was exhausted, eyes heavy, and her shoulders ached from lifting bags all day. Her plan was simple: grab coffee, call a ride home, and collapse into sleep. But the coffee shop near the terminal was crowded. She joined the line, still in uniform, hair pulled back, the locket pressing gently against her chest. She reached into her pocket, looking for her phone, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. You drink coffee after flying 12 hours? She turned around. Keanu, hoodie again, soft beanie over his head, same backpack slung over one shoulder. Melanie blinked. You again?